I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone what we're here for.
To see those nitro-burning funny cars. Vroom, vroom.
Heat has been on Jason's list of games to get, and a few weeks ago we found a copy. Apparently it's been stuck in reprint hell. I'm not interested in the game until he mentioned that it's deck building, and I was like, cool. But from playing the game, I found out it's more hand management than deck building. The first game in the beginner guide was very, very lackluster, bare bones, almost a patronizing. I could see something I liked about the game. Still couldn't figure out what I liked about the game. So we played with the garage module, which allows upgrades and stuff, and it got my attention enough to get the heavy rain expansion. Well, the duh part. As in a typical racing game, you have a start, and you have a finish. And you're usually going around in circles. Wow, super exciting. You start with heat on your engine, and the center dash is your engine on your board, and depending on the environmental effects or the racetrack, but I'm pretty sure it's just environmental effects, haven't seen a racetrack, that number 6 with the heat card, that +1, lots of effects in this game. Pretty interesting, actually. And then you have your default deck that has these 3 upgrades. If you don't use these upgrades, you do the garage mode, which are these upgrades, and you get 3 of these through Snake Draft. More on that later. You also have what's called the stress card. You start with whatever stress cards it says, usually 3, but the weather will change that effect. And this little plus symbol allows you to draw and look for a basic card. Well, draw off the top of your deck and find a basic card which is going to have this little speedometer on it, and you're going to add that to your value. Adds a really unique bid and guessing system to the game. You're going to start with a 7-card hand, and depending on what gear you're on, is how many cards you can play. As you can see these icons here, there are pluses on this. This allows you to boost. This little coolant icon here allows you to discard heat from your hand into your engine, which is super important. When I first played this game, I misunderstood the value of heat because heat and boost cards are considered trash cards. And I say trash cards is they cannot be discarded from your hand. They have this little garbage icon. In rare circumstances, your hand can be cluttered with them and it will cripple you. And this leads to kind of where you lack agency. Typical gameplay in Heat, you draw your opening hand, and then depending on your shift value, you're going to play that many cards. You can shift too high or too down, but you're going to have to take a heat and put it into your discard. And this is where heat gets really important. You need to pay the differences on corner speeds for heat or to do certain abilities. If you cannot pay that, that's when bad things start happening and you spin out, crash, and you get penalized like crazy. Heat is also very strict in following order of operation, really important. I tend to skip a lot of that because I'm impatient. But everyone is going to select their gear and pay the heat value. So if I want to go to 3, I got to pay 1 heat into my engine. But if I go to 2, I don't have to put a heat in. Then you do your movement, you reveal your cards, and you move that many spots. Pretty simple. Step 4 is this weird mechanic that's usually used in multiplayer games. Last car is always going to get an extra move, which is 1, and an extra cool. Step 5 is the important part. If you have heat in your hand, you can put it back into your engine with the cooling icon, and or you can pay 1 heat to flip the top card as a boost action and get that number added to your value. Step 6 is slipstream. If you're behind a car, you get to move 2 spaces in front of them. Can't be used to win the final lap of the game. Step 7 is where it's important. This is where you have to pay the heat difference. For example, if I went around this 2 with a 5 value, I'm 5 over 2, I gotta pay 3 heat out of my engine. If I cannot pay that 3 heat, my car spins out, I get knocked down to here, which isn't bad, but it definitely slows you down. That's not really the penalty. The penalty is, depending on where your gear shift is when you take the corner, you're gonna add that many stress cards to your deck, and that's where it hurts. In theory, and it's happened to me in games, I've had hands where it's like, oh cool, I have no choice and I gotta play these to get rid of them. It's a little wonky. Now, as I said, I was told this is a deck builder. It's a very, very limited deck builder. Depending on the game mode, you're going to get X amount of upgrades, and it's a snake draft. The last player gets to pick the first upgrade, and then it goes down. And then the second, so we're going to have 3 rows of upgrade picking. And there is a lot of RNG in the value to what you're going to get out of here. I am not a big fan of this, because some of the upgrades are very broken. And the balancing for it, I think, is kind of rough. I think it can be fixed with house ruling. I don't really think it needs it. I just think some of the super broken upgrades should probably be removed from the deck. As I was talking about these stress cards, every time you screw up, you're going to get a bunch of these. And depending on how bad you're doing in the game, you're going to get a lot of stress cards. You might have a lot of dead heat cards in your hand. And it's going to take away agency or choice, because you have to play whatever your gear shift number is at. And sometimes you just don't have a choice. Sometimes you're going to have a bunch of boost cards around this too, and you're like, I have to do this. Cool. And I've played enough games of this where I've had that experience. Where, yes, if you make a few bad plays, it's going to cripple you, and at that point, it just kind of feels like an AI is playing, because it just does whatever. You don't really have a choice, and that's not really fun. Now, I've heard the argument, well, you know, that's how races work. If you screw up, you get lapped behind. And I was just like, yeah, that's cool. I guess that's realistic. And the catch-up mechanic of moving 1 extra at the weird step 4, I guess, doesn't really help in my opinion. But when it's neck to neck, it's really cool. Now it comes down to, is the game good? The core box is a pretty good deal in my opinion. You get 5 game modules technically out of the box. There's just levels of complexity or mechanics, but they do change the way you play the game. And that is important to, you know, learn to crawl before you can run or something like that. Every variant adds a unique play experience. The game does start with 4 racetracks, which is really cool. We got USA, Italy, Great Britain, and France. That's a lot of content, and the tracks are all different. The USA being the easiest one I've played so far. Italy is pretty brutal. Great Britain was alright. You get 6 player cards with their default starting deck of cards, which is 15. The little, very generic stick shift. And their car, which the cars are all the same, but at least they added a different number, which I think is kind of a nice little add-on. You have weather effects, which are these giant tiles here. There's 6 of them. That adds a lot of variety, and of course, if we're going to do the math, it probably, I don't know, something to 500 different game modes. You have these little tiles that are placed out that add to the weather effects or to the turns. You have a score sheet, this handy thing. Notice it has 6 colored spots. Can't put your name. Not bad. And 151 modifying cards, such as your upgrade cards and your sponsorship cards. Your sponsorship cards are really neat. That goes with one of the race modules, where if you take a turn and do whatever it wants, you immediately draw one of these and add to your hand, and they have some really powerful effects. They are one-time effects, and they're discarded once you use them. There's a lot of stuff in the box. It's a good number of game modes and different things that it actually is a good value. And the insert is a very well done insert. The gameplay, as I've stated before, basic is basic, nothing exciting. It is critically important to teach probably the garage mode minimum to starting players before, if they've never played Heat. I bring this up because mistakes were made. I did a 4+ player group game in championship mode. And if you don't know what championship mode is, it is basically you're going to play X amount of races and do whatever the set of cards say. It's going to incorporate all the game mechanics, and I thought that everyone could grasp the concept of the game fairly quick. So yes, mistakes were made, but it was also the funnest game that I had with Heat so far. Like the first map, it was just a complete total mess. And then gradually you could see their skills improve when they understood the mechanics a little bit better and went along with the gameplay. And I was like, here it is, here's it. It did come a problem with certain players that just kind of got stuck, and that got back to the argument of, Are you playing badly, or is the game mechanically flawed with getting so many stress cards, heat cards, where you just didn't have a choice in the turn? A lot of it just began to feel like, well, I could just flip cards and it doesn't matter. That's just how the game works. And I was like, it feels like that. And in larger games, you can block people and be forced into taking stress cards when you can't make those turns because you have to overshoot them. It's not great. No, it is frustrating and it is punishing. And I still don't know how I feel about it. I don't like it because it's demotivating to other players and it doesn't make them feel invested to actually continue play. And I know that changes with the play group. Some people feel like, oh, I'm going to get better. But when you keep on drawing and getting stuck with a dead hand, it doesn't feel like you're doing much. 5 out of the 7 I've tested this game with really do like it, and the other 2 are not sure. Like I said, they're still debating if they played badly or there's something wrong with the game. The boost mechanic, remembering what's in your deck or what you played, because you are not allowed to look through your discard pile unless you have upgrades. It's restrictive. I do like it because it prevents metagaming and leaves a little bit of random chaos. It's kind of odd. It doesn't feel right to me. I know why it's there, it just doesn't feel right. Heat management is the core thing I really like about this game. Putting heat back in your engine, forcing you to shift into second gear or first gear to put that much heat back, just so you can plan the corners. And this is the thing that I think is what really throws people off and makes the game punishing and playing badly. Not realizing you have to pay the extra heat costs or whatever to do stuff, because you think that in your hand, and this is why the orders of operation is really important, you can put heat back into your engine before you have to pay the penalty difference for taking the turns. And I think it's a concept that a lot of people have a hard time grasping at the beginning. Heat's actually a resource. It's a dead card in your hand, but it is a resource that you need to pay that. And this mechanic of balancing heat, I do enjoy a lot. The game is fairly simple and quick to set up. This is a 2-player board right now. It's better with, like I said, 4 people. But it only took me like 5 minutes to do it. That's pretty quick for a game that supports up to 6 people. And honestly, it's not that much of a table hog. Most 6-player games take up a lot of space and are very complex. I do like how Heat is able to bring everything to the table and fit well. The rules could be written a little bit better, or at least get better diagrams. And it comes down to like the weather effect token stuff. Because these tents aren't always near their turn numbers. It's not overly difficult, but I wish there was a little like quick reference sheet. The rule books aren't terrible. They do have all the stuff on the back that just explains the iconography. And they're fairly simple. They're just kind of abstract. And I think that goes with the flaws of, hey, I made this, I'm writing the rules, I'm going to expect everyone to know what I'm thinking, which is the problem with the biases of everyone. I mean, let's face it, it's an art to write well. The downtime of players taking their turns, it's actually pretty quick, because, you really just play what you can, or you're forced to play what you don't want to. And I think like the boost mechanic is the thing that for risk takers really like. Give you that dopamine drip for getting that random whatever bonus to your move. Sometimes it's going to overthrow you, sometimes it's not. But it feels good when you pull it off and, that dopamine high from getting it right. Or the crushing despair of getting more stress cards and you're not actually enjoying the game. And I think the risk taking is a big appeal. Now, when you're neck and neck, there's a lot of really, really cool things. Like, this is where it gets really intense in the game. Being neck and neck, fighting over that, and trying to lead. It's pretty exciting. I'm not going to say it's not. It feels good. But it does suck, like I said. If you're dead last, this game is going to just punish you. And there's no way of catching up. Now, more experienced players tell me there's a lot of skill in the game. I really don't see it. Again, for me, it is play whatever you can play that's going to benefit you the most, and if you can't and you're forced into it, you don't have a choice. I don't know if that's skill. Determining taking a corner, but depending on what's in your hand, there might not be any skill to that choice. I'm not saying the game is bad. There is a je ne sais quoi about the game. It's easier for me to point out what I don't like about the game, but it's not enough to say I hate the game. Overall, Heat is a fun, and I say fun, entry casual game. I don't think this is a very complex game, but it kind of feels like it's not as deep as everyone's giving it credit for. But those people also really like racing games. This is not my forte. The game is not overcomplicated or overbloated, and it has just enough mechanics to keep me engaged. Let's go with the overall score. For the core box, components are 6 out of 10. There's a nice touch with a different number of cars, but it's pretty bare bones. The cardboard's actually good, and it will hold up. The linen cards are finished. The mats are okay for their purpose. I do like a recessed mat or something to keep your gear shift from getting bumped out. I've noticed this slides all over the place in games when people get excited. Rules couldn't be better written or laid out, specifically, like I said, the weather effect tokens and how these tents are. And the low score is really because the cars, I would add, wanted some more variety. It's nice that they at least changed the numbers, but it's pretty bare bones at the minimum. The gameplay is a 7 out of 10. It technically has 5 game modes, which is good. Lots of upgrade cards. Sponsor cards provide a huge variety of actions, limits on upgrades. The draft format is frustrating, though, when bad RNG shows up, because you might lose out on some really, really strong upgrades that do unbalance the game. It's okay. It's not complicated. It's fairly quick unless you play the championship variant. It took us, I think, 5 hours to play 4 maps. Granted, rules explanation, and there was talking. In a 2-player mode, this is like a 15-minute game. The championship mode, if you're just running tracks, but the championship mode, there's a lot more setup, so it does add a lot more, but it is multiple tracks. What prevents this game from getting a higher score for gameplay is how it can be super punishing or a lack of agency with choice. Again, I've said it before. Insert and storage. It's a 9 out of 10. The insert's very good, but it's cheaply made. It's also confusing when you have 8 player slots for a 6-player game. I was hoping it would store future content, and it probably does, but I'm going to keep thinking. But I like to keep things nice. Sleeving cards will prevent it from being organized the way I like it to be organized. Art is 8 out of 10. The art fits. It's bright. It's fun. Some of the things I don't like about the art is how things don't miss. Like, I guess this is supposed to be a map and not an actual overhead view or it's a picture, but you got like goggles, photos, keys, weird stuff on it that just kind of distract. Like, this is detailed and that's not. And I think it's supposed to be an aerial photo, but I don't really like having the other stuff on it. Value, the game is 8 out of 10 for value. There's lots of stuff in the box. The different play modes, variety, does offer a lot of skill checks for all level of players. The overall score is good. It's definitely a game to try out or buy if you really like what it has to offer.
But wait, there's more!
Alright, off to the Heavy Rain expansion. This is just going to be opinions here, but I feel that Heavy Rain is severely overpriced for what it is. I bring this up because it costs $35, around $37 with tax, or $38, somewhere around that, but close enough to $40 for me to be annoyed by the content amount in here. We have a player mat. We have a 7-player. We have a... Which I like this concept of short expansion rule books. We have a Japan and Mexico board. But here's where I get to the problem when I open this. So we have a 7-player. That's cool. We have a new score pad that only supports 6 players. Odd. We do have 19 actual new cards to the game, not including the racetrack cards, because those aren't really for playing. And these are some really cool upgrades. There's only 12 of these for the 96, so getting these in draft is kind of hard. And our sponsors with the sponsor deck, with the 50 some odd cards, adding 7, it's kind of hard to get these reliably. Of course, we have the standard player components, the 7th player stuff. And then we have 15 more heat cards and 5 stress cards. This kind of annoys me because the core box already had enough heat and stress cards to cover 7 cars. Would have made sense if they added, 2 more players to this and actually incorporated that. That would have been much nicer. This seems kind of weird because really you're not getting a lot in the game. It introduces 2 new mechanics, which is fun. And I'm not going to lie that the Japan map's really cool, but the Mexico map is atrocious with the mechanics because it only has one of the expansions mechanics for the Mexico board. For an expansion called Heavy Rain, I was expecting weather effects, weather tiles, more stuff on the racetrack. And this track plays a lot like the US, so it's not really fun, it's just longer. The Japan side is the side I enjoy the most on this. The water here adds an extra heat when you're shifting from any gear position. And then you still have these chicanes that affect the effect on that area. And this map also has more details and fun nuanced stuff, like this bridge. It doesn't affect gameplay, but it changes it up. One of the things is also, hey, how does this space character go on the bridge? Well, you have number 15 and 14. So there you are. Honestly, the expansion doesn't really offer much in gameplay change. Like I said, with Mexico, it's very similar to the US, a lot of straights, it's not that bad. Japan has the most fun just because of the water here affecting you with shifting, because, you know, coming around tight corners, shifting, a lot more choices and strategic plays. But it does feel like a letdown. The upgrades are cool, but with how hard they are to get out of the deck, consistency I just don't see being there. And like I said, for what I paid, it's not a lot. I'm actually really surprised about that. Honestly, if they did the packaging that Terraforming Mars and Clank did, where it was just a blister pack with a game board and some new pieces, and they retailed around like $30, maybe less, maybe more. But it was transparent and you got to see what was actually in the packaging to decide the value. This seems very deceptive for how big the box is. And the box is, you know, basically half the price of the main game, which offers so much. And there's not enough of these mechanics to make me think, oh yeah, this is a good expansion. If Mexico is more like Japan, maybe, but I doubt it. The map layout was very plain and uninspired. I don't want to say it's a money grab. If you want to have a 7th player, it's a way to have a 7th player. I just feel like that this is a weird thing where you only have 6 cards. Unlike the old, which had 6 cards and they were colored, this doesn't. So it just feels a little odd to me. More than likely, there's probably going to be an 8th expansion, or a 2nd expansion for an 8th player coming out. I don't know if their design choices for everything to fit in the core box, but it's just not organized well. If I put in the orange in the stack, it makes it ever cramped and separate heat cards and stuff. It's just a mess. They could have put more slots in, but hindsight's 50-50. I do like expansions that don't change the game or overcomplicate it, and Heavy Rain fits that fine. Price-wise, it doesn't. I've bought games before that have expansions that are really just an extra player expansion that offer much the game change at all, and it's just kind of like, is it worth it? I don't know about Heavy Rain. If you can get a group of more than 6 players, great, works out for you, but I've noticed that it's always hard with people in daily life commitments of just the busyness of life. So I find it a kind of an unrealistic expectation. On the plus side, Heat's pretty much, like I said earlier, a great core entry party game. It's not overly complex, it's fairly simple, and you could play a good amount of people, 6 people, but Heat fits that niche, and that's fine. Heat, I think, is good for that. I don't know if the Heavy Rain expansion is worth it. Subjective value is whatever you interpret it. I don't think it's worth it, in my opinion, but yeah, you do you. If you have a constant group that wants to play with 7, go for it. As far as, you know, variety and new stuff, really not that much. I expected more, and honestly, looking at the back of the box, it sounded like there was more. But I just don't think Heavy Rain is needed with the core game. Maybe later down the road, when they release the next expansion, it'll offer more stuff, more mechanics. It might tie in some of Heavy Rain's mechanics, and that might actually make it good. So what do I rate the Heavy Rain expansion? I'm going to put it in the category of not good. I wouldn't buy it unless you're a big fan of Heat, and if you're looking for that little extra variety. As I've shown, it's not much. Well, if you like what I do, and you want to help me out, do the YouTube things, subscribe, like, etc. Just a reminder, I'm still doing the 2024 giveaway for the year. You don't have to subscribe to win, but subscribing does get me to those milestones so I can give away stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this review of Heat and Heavy Rain. Other than that, take care and GG's.